Hi, my name is Megan Tornberg, and I did my case study on the Love Canal. In my opinion, this is one of the most significant, well, probably not just my opinion, but it's one of the most significant examples in the history of environmental ethics, at least in the United States. Kind of shows you what happens when large organizations like corporations, government agencies, and even like engineers, I guess, fail to prioritize health and safety of the public. So I'm going to cover who's involved, what happened, and how the code of ethics was violated, and I'll look at some possible alternatives as well at the end. So let's get into it. So I think the first step of understanding this case is to look at who was involved. So Hooker Chemical, which was later acquired by Occidental Petroleum, was the company that buried over 21,000 tons of toxic waste between the years 1942 and 1953. It's a very big problem. The Niagara Falls School Board played a major role in this. They purchased the contaminated land in the 1950s for just $1, which is kind of crazy. But this was despite being warned by Hooker about possible risks, caused by dumping all of that chemical waste into the abandoned canal. Residents and families who later moved into the neighborhood became victims of this decision by the school board, and they faced tons of health issues, miscarriages, birth defects, all that fun stuff, even cancer. So it's really unfortunate. Finally, government bodies such as the New York Department of Health, Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA as I listed on there, and President Jimmy Carter became involved when the crisis grew into a federal emergency eventually. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Now let's take a look at a timeline of events. So as you can see, this timeline of events shows how decades of negligence built up to disaster overall. So if we look at the first point here from 1942 to 1953, within those years, Hooker Chemical used the unfinished canal as a dumping ground for more than 21,000 tons, as I mentioned before, of toxic waste. So, that's really bad. If you look at the next bullet point, in 1953, they sold the land to the Niagara Falls School Board for $1. They did include the legal disclaimers, but that didn't stop the land from being developed anyways. So another, I keep saying it, but very unfortunate event. Throughout the 1950s, all the way through the 1970s, homes and even a whole school were built directly on top of that contaminated ground from all the chemicals. So by the 1970s, residents began reporting foul odors, like chemical odors, chemical seepage into basements and yards, and some more serious health problems. In 1978, the government declared the area a federal health emergency. So, around 800 families evacuated the area due to those health problems they were having. And, just 2 years later, in 1980, the disaster became the driving force behind CERCLA, which is also known as the Superfund Law. So yeah, we'll get more into that in a bit. Moving on, we're going to look at facts and evidence of this case study. So the facts and evidence make it clear how serious this situation was. Toxic chemicals were not contained. They seeped into people's basements, into playgrounds, and into like people's own home backyards, which is insane. It would go into the soil and water supply. It was just very bad situation for everyone living around it. So yeah. The residents reported high rates of miscarriage and birth defects, as I mentioned before, as well as increased cancer diagnoses. Sorry, you know what I meant. And respiratory issues, which, yeah, bad. Louis Gibbs, a local resident, became the leader of the Love Canal Homeowners Association and fought day and night for recognition of the problem. Through her activism, the issue gained a national media attention, and eventually it forced the state and federal governments to respond to the issue. And throughout all this media recognition and just health issues from over 800 families, the Love Canal quickly became a national symbol of environmental neglect and corporate irresponsibility, because of course, as you know, corporates just want money. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. The NSPE Code of Ethics violations. So the NSPE Code of Ethics makes it very clear that engineers must prioritize public safety and basically just be truthful, if that's the right word, in their professional work. So I found 3 sections that directly apply here. So section 1.1 states engineers must hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. And clearly, from all the other information I've given you, this was violated. Families were knowingly placed in danger, so, makes it pretty clear that this was violated. If you go to section 2.1a, this requires engineers to advise their clients or employers if their professional judgment is being overruled in a way that endangers life or property, basically. And in this case, contamination warnings were ignored by the company and the school board, and basically nobody stepped up to insist that this was safe. So yeah, clearly it was not very safe because it caused all kinds of bad things. And the last section that I found was section 3.1. It demands that engineers be objective and truthful in their reports, basically. Instead, these risks were minimized and hidden from the public, so it denied the residents a chance to fully protect themselves from this horrible instance. So yeah. Now I want to look at a ethics filter, so just to see. So I want to talk about the right to life. So, well, let me start. I think there's 2 major natural rights that come into focus with this situation. The right to life is one of them. So I guess you could say there was no technical violation to the rights of life, or to the right of life, because there's no confirmed deaths directly caused by this. But I think it's pretty clear that people's lives were taken away from this, whether it was from cancer or just horrible birth defects that basically ruin your life, No way all of this was coincidence, so even though it's not technically violating your right to life, I think it is very unethical. I just say that. I also want to talk about the right to security of person, because this was clearly violated. They suffered miscarriages, long-term illness, and psychological stress. Basically makes them less secure of a person. So I think this kind of helps show the side of the right to life that is actually violated versus like implying. I don't know how to say it, but hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. So using the principle of respect, we can see that the exploiters were Hooker Chemical, obviously, and the approving authorities who sold and developed that land, because obviously they did things that they knew would probably end up in a situation that happened. And yeah, the exploited were obviously the families, especially the children and pregnant women who lived on that contaminated soil. The ends of this exploitation were cost savings and liability protection for the company. The means was the concealment of true risks, which denied the community the ability to make informed choices. So, you know, they did not have any say in this whatsoever, which was not very ethical. So here's the evaluation of it. Overall, I think the Love Canal shows us how ethics can be ignored long before laws are put in place. Hooker Chemical prioritized profit and legal protection over the health of families. The local government and school board also failed, in my opinion, and I think in anybody's opinion, approving the development that put children and families directly in harm's way. Government oversight didn't take action until residents protested and forced the issue into the public, because as I said before, this was hidden from the public for the longest time. The key lesson here is that ethical responsibility comes before legal responsibility. Just because something isn't yet illegal doesn't mean it is ethical. It has been mentioned many times in this class. So here are some alternatives and incentives. So I think, oh my god, sorry, I almost choked. To prevent another Love Canal, systemic incentives should have been put in place. So first of all, mandatory hazardous waste transparency laws. Sorry, I'm so bad at talking. Transparency laws could have been required by companies to disclose the location and contents of dumps, and also independent inspectors verifying safety before any land development would have been nice, because again, this would have never happened. And second, I think stronger whistleblowing protections would have allowed employees or community members to report problems safely without, fear of retaliation, possibly. If these measures were put in place decades earlier, I think the Love Canal disaster probably would have never happened, because people aren't stupid and they would know that this would cause some issues. So, yeah. So in conclusion, the Love Canal was a turning point in the U.S. environmental ethics and policy. The suffering of hundreds of families forced the federal government to act, creating the Superfund program to clean up hazardous waste sites nationwide. The main lesson is clear. Engineers, corporations, and governments must act proactively to protect communities, rather than having them wait until harm has already been done. Ethics must guide decision making before laws are even written, because once the damage is done, it's often too late to take it back. So sometimes people should think before they act. And yeah, here's my works cited, just in case you wanted to see it. So thank you.